I was not very old when I met my first human. There was a place in the nearby mountains that my parents told me never to go to. Well, what can I say? As a young male Iliad, there was just a sign to go there. We Iliad were a cold-blooded species, and as far as I was concerned, the elders let their tails drag on the ground too much. We walked and ran upright for a reason, to be fast, to be warm from exertion, not sitting around talking endlessly about the affairs of others on different worlds. We had no spaceships of our own, only a spaceport for others to use and carry our produce to other markets, so I'd probably never leave this planet. Exploring was what I would do. Now, I had heard of humans, so I was not totally ignorant. We had broadcast access to the galactic web, but the Iliad were not an aggressive species, as we were the top of the food chain on our world. The humans had offered their protection for trade and minor services when required, and we accepted. Humans were well known amongst other races, the elders had told us. Their word was considered unbreakable, a blood pact with whoever took it. So we let them fight for us in the belief we were the morally superior for never fighting. Humans and lesser races could waste their lives fighting. My race cared little. In their mighty fleets, the humans traded across the galaxy, our borders protected by their warriors, the elite of any fighting force in any galactic system, the Banshee. Little was known of them, a small force for a galactic civilization and very rarely seen. However, when the Herald for the Dead called, empires fell. To bring down the ire of the Banshee was to be avoided at all costs. But back to my story. My parents decided to have a weekend visiting my mother's sister, who was waiting expectantly for her own hatchling to emerge, so I was to be left on my own for 4 days to study for my exams. This would work out well. They were not even at the end of the street when I bolted for the mountains with my camping pack, sitting comfortably on my shoulders. The sun had just passed its midpoint when I stumbled across a well-worn path. This didn't seem right for an area that was supposedly never to be travelled. The path led in one direction that could only be to the spaceport, and the other further into the mountains. Turning towards the mountains, I had travelled until nearly sunset, when I smelt something cooking. Under cover of the path's side bushes, I crept forward. Carved into the base of a cliff was a modest dwelling, complete with outside cooking area and seating under a large overhang. A doorway led into the cliff face. I was considering my options when I felt something poke me in the back. Turning swiftly, I faced my first human, female I think, wearing a brightly decorated one-piece coverall tucked into well-worn black boots. It was nearly a head taller than I was. A steel-headed spear with a wooden shaft now poked me in the stomach. "Not very neighbourly of you sneaking around," it grumbled at me in galactic standard. With a final poke, it raised the spear and walked past me. "Supper's on, come grab a bite," it called back to me. Stumbling after it began one of the strangest friendships of my young life. Over many months, I coaxed out of Julie, for that was her name, many a story of her life. Julia travelled the depth of the galaxy for her people, with those she called her brothers and sisters. She had seen wonders beyond comprehension and horrors beyond belief. That was until she could no longer make peace with herself. In the final decades of her life, she just wanted tranquility, to finally be free of her mind's torments, so her government had acquired for her a home on the most peaceful planet they knew. We became friends over time as I visited her, much to the trepidation of my parents. Our best times were exploring the mountains together, and Julie had no fear. No cliff was too high, no river too wide for her to travel. The more we travelled, the more my friend began to laugh. The trip I remember the most was not a gigantic endeavour, just a small stream of mud we tried to cross on a log, unfortunately not very successfully. With one step too far, I started to fall and grabbed hold of the closest object, Julie. When we hit the mud, Julie was laughing so hard she could barely breathe. After much difficulty, we extradited ourselves to lie on the stream bank and laugh ourselves out. When we had calmed down, Julie sat up to look at me, and her stare became uncomfortably long. I was just about to speak when she reached into a sealed pocket on her mud-stained clothes and withdrew a single small silver star. After staring at it for a time, she attached it to the collar of my jacket. I began to speak, but Julie just raised a single finger to her lips in a gesture of silence. Even our trip back to her home, she would not elaborate on the Silver Star. Over time, I even managed to coax her into coming to town with me every now and again, and not just at the spaceport to collect the goods that were always waiting for her. I was embarrassed at the supercilious looks given to her by my people. However, Julie seemed never to notice. On our last trip, I realized I had failed my friend. She would have been safe in the mountains, but I brought the horror back to her. As we entered town, a pirate raider landed near the road into the town to collect slaves and loot. These practices were not unheard of on other planets, but never here. There was no hesitation from Julie. She tore off a crystal bracelet from her right wrist and crushed it underfoot. The cracked bracelet began to emit a high-pitched keening sound that set my ridge crest on edge and focused the pirate gang on Julie. Julie emerged, embedding the point of her spear in the closest pirate, and then twisted the head off in the pirate's body. Stepping back, Julie snapped the handle of the spear across her knee, breaking it in two. From the hollowed-out haft, a black and silver cylinder as long as Julie's forearm fell into her hand. A vibroblade. I knew what it was. I had seen them in videocasts. From the cylinder, a thin blade of titanium-infused metal extended out to 1 meter in the blink of an eye. Energized by the power cell in the handle, the blade vibrated at a molecular level, rendering it invisible. A combat weapon for the elite of human combat forces. My Julie was a Banshee. Even with intensive training, very few could use a vibroblade. Without constant spatial awareness, the blade's invisible cutting edge was dangerous, not only to those around the wielder, but to the wielder themselves. Nothing could stop the blade, as it could cut through anything, separating the very molecules themselves. For in-close fighting, especially aboard spaceships, it was devastating. My race, the Iliad, were naturally fast, but Julie was a ghost among lumbering beasts. In what was nearly a choreographed dance, Julie attacked. With no superfluous motion and imperfect balance, Julie laid waste to the pirates, 2/3 of which fell in the first seconds of her dance of death. As they tried to distance themselves away from danger, so they could raise their weapons, Julie's dance became even faster. The vibroblade was unseen but never still, and every stroke severed a head or separated limbs from a torso. Julie was brought down from a distance. A single pirate, who had now just entered the town, fired his long weapon, striking Julie in the back, felling her instantly. The 3 remaining pirates looked around at their dismembered comrades. They began to approach Julie's body. I cried out for my friend, which raised the remaining pirates' weapons to me. Even with a mortal wound, Julie struck one last time. She had waited until the pirates had roughly aligned, then threw her blade with her last ounce of strength. Her throw severed the legs from the closest pirate, before cutting the second pirate in half with the torso. The last pirate was skewered through the chest, as the invisible blade embedded itself in the wall behind him. In a surreal moment that made me feel like time had slowed, I watched as the handle of the blade started to slide down through the pirate as gravity took hold. When it cleared the pirate's body and hit the ground, the handle wobbled upright, as the blade was drawn by the gravitational forces of my planet. The pommel guard that had snapped out when the blade extended was the only thing stopping the blade from cutting its way to our planet's core until, after having no contact with his master, the blade's power source timed out. I cradled my friend on the blood-soaked ground for over an hour, surrounded by my people until the humans arrived. When Julie had broken her bracelet, a subspace message had been sent to bring her Banshee brothers and sisters. A large human male in black armor sat beside me on the ground, taking up Julie's hand in his own. After a while, he spoke in a deep, low voice. "Our sister died well. Let that be a comfort to you." "She did not have to die at all," I screamed through my tears. "She could have left." Raising my head up to look at him, I noticed 3 small golden stars on the collar of his armor. He was an admiral. "No," he stated with a deep sigh. "She could not. The commander came to this planet to find peace after many years of being the protector of all we have, and all we call friends. Julie knew better than most. We are what we are. There comes a time when you have to say no more to the evil that is out there. Not many can do what we do, not even amongst humans." "My life is not worth hers," I yelled at him. "The star on your collar says differently. The giving of the rank emblem signifies to all Banshee that your life was worth the sacrifice. In some way, Julie believed you saved her," the Admiral finished. Looking around at the wall of black armor, I noticed for the first time that not all were human, but they all stood shoulder to shoulder, silently grieving for their sister. "This is so wrong," I mumbled. "No one should die for another." Standing up, the male gently lifted Julie and held her in his arms as if she was a sleeping child. Looking at me, he spoke. No, they should not. However, to understand why Julie acted in the way she did, you must first ask yourself, what am I prepared to sacrifice to protect all I care about? If the answer is all that I am, then you will have a glimpse of the commander's thoughts. With that, he slowly headed to their ship, while the other Banshees fell in on either side as an honor guard for their sister. As their ship lifted, I looked down at my hands covered in the blood of my friend, and I knew, for the first time in my life, I knew my purpose, what I had to do. I will be Banshee.